Good evening and welcome to Suffering in Silence with Evangelist Tia here on Love Bay Afrobeat Music Talk Radio. We're here with you every Friday evening at 7 p.m. Eastern. And Love Bay, we want you to remember that we're rising out of the ashes together. Our topic on this evening is how religion can help or harm victims or survivors of domestic violence. And we have with us our co-host this evening is Erin Mitchell. And our guest on this evening is Rachel Baldi, and we will give her a moment to introduce herself. Listeners, if you have any questions or comments for our guest or co-host, you can email us at sufferinginsilencedv@gmail.com, or you can text the number 437-778-3299. Also, if you have any resources that you would like to share with us on a national or local level from your country, your community, local organizations, or your faith community, you can also email us at sufferinginsilencedv@gmail.com. And with that, Erin, if you would go first and greeting our listeners and viewers on tonight.
Yes. Hi, everybody from Love Bay community. It's always a pleasure to be with everyone on Friday evenings here in the U.S. I'm on the Pacific Coast in Oregon and have a pretty rough signal tonight, so my camera may stop throughout so I can just tap in via the sound. Tia, are you hearing me okay?
Yes, I hear you fine.
Okay, great. It's just so good to be with a group of people that really utilize much of their heart and time to support our communities with situations that a lot of people turn a blind eye to and a lot of people are struggling with. And yet we all as communities and as individuals need solutions and need tools to support ourselves and our families and our communities in whatever form. So it's really great to be here. I myself have experience in my family with domestic violence and sexual violence. I also have experience working with communities that experience high rates of violence in the indigenous communities in North America. And so that's where my nonprofit background comes from. And I'm on Tia's board for Rise Out of the Ashes, and we provide immediate needs for people that are in domestic violence situations that need to get out of them. And so that has just been such an honor to be a part of that circle that Evangelist Tia has created. So with that, I'll turn it back over. And I'm just so excited to be here with you tonight and to get to know better Rachel Baldi, which I'm so excited to hear from.
Thank you, Erin. So with that, Rachel, if you would please introduce yourself to our Love Bay listeners and viewers.
Absolutely, yes. So my name is Rachel Baldi. I am a leadership development facilitator and an executive coach. I am the co-founder of Up Level Productions, and we're a leadership development consultancy. And when I'm not at work doing the day job, I'm an interfaith advocate, end-of-life coach and grief coach. And then I work with domestic violence survivors as a coach for them. And I am a survivor of domestic violence.
Thank you so
to have
much.
this conversation. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm very excited. Rachel, I've been looking forward to this. It's been, I want to say, definitely a few weeks, if not months, that we've been waiting for this conversation. So Love Bay, as usual, we want to start with sharing some resources, and then we're going to move into our topic for this evening. And as Erin has already mentioned, our nonprofit is Rise Out of the Ashes, Inc. And the major part of what we do is the emergency funding and helping victims and survivors move on financially whenever we can do that. We assist with finances and transportation, relocation, food, housing, clothing, whatever it is that we can do, whatever it is that we have the money to do, that's what we do. And so if you would like to support us financially, you can visit our GoFundMe page. Just go to GoFundMe and look for Rise Out of the Ashes, Inc. Or you can, if you choose To do so, you can write a check out to Rise Out of the Ashes, Inc., and our address is P.O. Box 15. We are in Drexel Hill, PA, and the zip is 19026. So as I continue to ask, help us to help others. I want to share with you Pastor Darius Daniels. He's a pastor of Change Church. He has several locations in the United States. His website is dariusdaniels.com, and his YouTube channel is Darius Daniels TV. I believe that his ministry can be a helpful resource in just moving on in your healing process. I want to share from the Virgin Islands, the Women's Coalition of St. Croix, and this is in Christian Virgin Islands. Their website is wcstx.org. Then we have the Puerto Rico Coalition Against Domestic Violence and Sexual Assault in San Juan, Puerto Rico. Their website is pazparallamujer.org. We have New Mexico Coalition Against Domestic Violence in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Their website is www.nmca.org. And then we have the New Mexico Coalition of Sexual Assault Programs, also in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And that website is nmcsap.org. And with that, we move into our topic for tonight, which again is how religion can help or harm victims and survivors of domestic violence. And I will start by saying this is a very sensitive topic personally for me. It touches me very deeply. And whenever I speak of clergy or religion dealing with domestic violence, I try to always make sure that there is someone else in the room with me to maybe to balance out the conversation, to make sure that it's not purely emotional, because my emotions are great in this area. My experience was a very, very horrific experience. And so I always try to introduce and bring another voice into the room so the facts can be understood, so the situation can be understood, and so that my emotions don't overtake the conversation or the presentation. I do not play devil's advocate. I don't give scenarios where, any kind of abuse or any kind of behavior can be excused or be explained away. I take a very, very hard line. If you are an authority in religion, there is information that you need to know. There are things that you need to not do. There are things that you should do. And it is your responsibility to find out that information before a problem occurs. So again, I take a very hard line, and I know that comes from my personal experience. I do not want others to suffer what I suffered. So I try very, very much to bring the situation to awareness. I try very much to bring clarity, to bring focus, and put it at the forefront. And so with that, I just wanted to throw that out there first. So with that, we're going to move into this topic. And Rachel, I'm just going to go right to you to just start us off with how you want to open the door to this, because again, I'm one-sided. I know that, and I just go. I just go. So I want to give this to you first.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And I think I want to, echo and name that there's such a wide range of experiences, and that shouldn't take away your lived experience. So your lived experience, you have every right to have and own. And so all of your emotions are welcome here in this conversation. I just want to name that. I don't want you to park them at the door, because that is your lived experience. And the truth is, as you said, is our religious leaders, they do have a responsibility. they have a huge responsibility in our religious communities. And I think that there's a wide range from ones who cause shame, blame, isolation, not believing, spiritual abuse, and many more things. That's at the harm end of the spectrum. And then there are some religious communities that help to empower and have spiritual healing, community support, and justice. So there's this range of like the worst harm can be done, and then there can be a lot of help done. And then there's this lived experience on that spectrum for people all the way through the whole spectrum of that. And I think that religion can be used in a way that can misinterpret and cause harm. And then it can be used to help and heal. And so depending on each person's lived experience, for me, I actually found the religion of Islam after my domestic violence experience. So I didn't have a religious community to go to when I was experiencing domestic violence. And so I don't know what it would have been like if I had, and how I would have been received. I became Muslim and converted to Islam after my experience, and it provided me with so much healing and comfort and guidance. But that was, I didn't go to a religious community and ask for help. So who knows what would have happened if I had. So yeah, I think it's about talking about what are the ways that our religious leaders and our religious communities can help, and what are the ways that they harm, and educating people on that.
Mm-hmm. And so on the other side of that, in my experience, I actually sought out help from religious leaders while I was in the domestic violence situation. And so when I sought out help, I was looking for, I would say, all types of support. I was looking for emotional support. I was looking for financial, physical support. I was looking for mental support. I was looking for someone to say, we're going to help you through this. Even if we don't know how to do it, we're going to figure this out with you. That's not what I got. And I am a Christian. I've been a Christian all my life. And what I was met with was a group of men throwing a Bible at me saying, you're supposed to stay married to this man because that's what these scriptures say. And I was very open. I was very honest. This man is physically abusing me. He's sexually abusing me, financially, emotionally, everything, the whole nine. He had given me a sexually transmitted disease after being with prostitutes, was ended in me having to have a surgery because I didn't know. I didn't have any idea until he had gotten arrested, and that like opened another can of worms in what we were dealing with, which led to me going to a doctor. And then, it was just, it ended in me having a surgery. And still with all of this, I was told God wants you to stay married to this man. And I looked at these people like, you got to be kidding me. Like you're crazy. Like, and it's not just that he did those things and he's doing these things now. It got to the point where I know he's going to take my life. Like I'm telling you this. I'm communicating this to you as clearly as I possibly can. And you're going to tell me I'm supposed to stay married to him.
Yeah. Because
he's your friend, because he was one of the ministers there. And it was like, when does my life become important? When do I get to be a person? When is he going to be held accountable and responsible for his actions? And it was like, I'm not asking you guys to do anything. I'm not asking you to try to have him arrested or anything. First of all, I'm asking you to believe me. Mm-hmm. And it was like, I was just tossed aside.
Yeah.
And so that is not something that I can just brush off lightly. And I mean, after all these years later, it's that right there is something that I can't overlook. I can't say.
Well, how do you get past that or forgive that? Because that is when religious power or religious leadership is used actually against you rather than for you. And so that's a form of spiritual abuse or, religious abuse. And it definitely happens in the Muslim community. In the work that I do now with domestic violence, is similar things. Oh, you should stay with your husband because of patience. We have a sabr in our religion around patience. Forgiveness. Many different interpretations are taken and then used to make the victim feel as if they should stay, they should endure. This is God's will. This is God's test. And all that does is isolate that human being even further and make it even worse for them, because now not only do they have an abuser, they actually have a spiritual abuser in a way in the group who are not believing you and making you feel that way. So,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, so absolutely. And I'll say this, and then Erin, I'll ask you for your thoughts, a question or comment, but it's not just having to deal with the domestic violence that you may be experiencing, but as you said, it's also the spiritual abuse that comes from the religious leaders. But another aspect is that no matter what religion you're in, because of the experience that you have, that's either going to draw you closer or push you away from the God that you serve. Now, if I was not the person that I am, I wouldn't be a Christian. If I'd listened to them and if I'd felt like, their word is the final word, or if I, really just put my heart into the wrong actions that they were displaying, they could have led me into a devastation that was irreparable. And so that's another layer that needs to be recognized. There are people who walk away from Christianity, who walk away from the Islamic community, who walk away from whatever they were raised in and believed in, because the person in authority handled them and handled their situation in a wrong way. And when you are a religious leader, you can't be flipped like that. You can't take your authority and just use it whenever, treat men one way, treat women another way. Or if an issue is in front of you that you don't want to deal with, you just sweep it under the rug. Or if this person is giving money to your church or your mosque or whatever it is, whatever they do is fine. It's okay. No, you have a wife in front of you who is literally broken and bleeding, but because her husband gives financially on a regular basis, what he does, it's okay. So it's even, the issue of your personal relationship with God being harmed. And that right there alone can affect and cause harm and damage that, oh my goodness, it goes beyond the physical. It goes beyond the emotional and the psyche. That's when you get to spiritual. I don't know if you can go any deeper than that one right there. I think that, that right there, that's a hard one to come back from. Erin, you have any thoughts you want to throw in there?
Yeah, I just want to apologize. I can't have my camera on or you won't be able to hear me. So, but I'm just enjoying what you're both saying. It's really important that we have advocates that are outspoken about this, because I think that it's really important for every single person to know, and especially people that are, responsible for children or parents. It's really important that each and every one of us knows that they have a sovereign right to stand up for their rights, and that religious leaders don't have authority over any individual's body or any individual's children. And the leaders are human. They aren't God. They aren't source. Exactly. They aren't love. They aren't the power. They are human. And when they are going against what we know in our hearts to be a direction that is towards love, then I believe that it is then we have to step beyond that, and we have to find another path, another support system, and really walk away as soon as possible. Because I think in my experience, it was assuming that that I could stick around and there'd be somebody else, and there might be somebody else, and and it was just kind of a situation where I kept getting the same response, and then I just shut up about it, right? So then I just internalized the experience, and my experience of abuse was directly with a religious leader. So, and that was when I was in my teens, and I was 14. So, the other piece of it is, your family can be so into the religious, spiritual aspects of whatever it is that you follow, that they then might side with the religious authorities, which happened in my case as well. So this is also something that, again, the more we can bring awareness to it and attention to it, and just speak openly about, look, we're not attacking anybody, we're not attacking leaders, we're not disowning any type of religious belief systems. But there is a right and a wrong, and we have to, and especially I think as women, really not be insecure about what we know to be true, and really just finding a support system that you can trust. And if you are being hurt, or your children are being hurt in any way, and you seek help for that in whatever way, and that is met with denial, or with basically with not even with I'm like having a moment, with not taking responsibility to give you the support that you need, or direct you even if they can't, then we have to find somebody else that supports us, that's on our same page. So yeah, that's my comment.
Yeah, but thank you so much. I absolutely agree with the words that you shared, and I want to be clear on a couple points here before we go back to Rachel. First, I want to say I am not saying to anyone to not try to get help from your religious leaders, whatever religion you serve in. I am not saying don't try. Please do. If you think that is an avenue that you can go towards and you will get what you need as you're dealing with domestic violence, please try. What I am definitely saying is that religious leaders need to be helpful, need to be responsible, need to be accountable. They need to be educated and have the information ready for those that come to them, which very clearly, in my belief, means you don't wait for a problem to come to you before you're prepared for it. So religious leaders, the same information that we give to victims and survivors, religious leaders can go to the domestic violence agencies, the national agencies, the local agencies. Religious leaders can call, walk into the office. You can go to the websites. There are specific areas that are for religious leaders to teach you information so you can learn how you should respond, so you can learn what scenarios will look like. If a situation comes to you and you're dealing with it, it's just in the midst of it, absolutely call a domestic violence agency, explain the situation, and find out, what should I do? How should I guide this person? It really is okay to say, I don't know. What is not okay is to throw a Bible at someone and say, these scriptures say you need to stay in this house with this person because you stood before God and took vows. No, not if this man is trying to kill me. Not if this woman is threatening my life. No, God doesn't sanction that. And another point that I wanted to say is that for me personally in my life, this is not just the experiences that I've had with religious leaders did not just come from my domestic violence relationship with my ex-husband. I have ran into spiritual leaders, specifically in Christianity, who, as of today, 2024, hold the reasoning of If you pray, you'll feel better. If you pray, you won't have triggers. If you pray, those memories won't bother you. Or if you pray, then, everything will just be better. So today, 2024, there are still religious leaders who are believing the wrong information and who are not taking the time, again, to educate themselves. So it's not something that I'm holding on to from years ago and it's just still bothering me today. No, it's bothering me today because I still see it today. And it bothers me just as much to see it occurring in someone else's life as it did in my life. And doesn't matter what religion it is, people are supposed to be helped. They're supposed to be cared for and they're supposed to be supported. And if you don't know how to help and assist in a specific area, then you go learn. Mm-hmm. You find out. And with that, Rachel, I want to ask you, if you can share what help actually looks like, because I can tell you what the wrong thing is.
Yeah, what help looks like. Well, I just want to underline a few things that you have said as well, because I just think that they're so important, is that, every mosque, synagogue, church should have a plan and process in place when someone comes and says, I am experiencing domestic violence. And like you said, they should have resources, be educated and know where to point people. And the amount of times, unfortunately, in 2024, when I ask a mosque or in certain communities, what is your process? They don't have one. And so that's something that I'm advocating for all the time in my community, in the Muslim communities, is to make sure that they do have a process in place. And even down to here's another thing. I don't hear khutbahs. For us, it's called a khutbah on a Friday, like a sermon, where they talk about domestic violence. I don't know about in your community, but how often do we hear them talking about domestic violence? And that's a problem because everyone wants to pretend, it doesn't happen in our community. It happens in every community. It happens in every class. It happens in every country. It's unfortunately a universal thing, domestic violence. And so we need them to talk about it openly and educate. And then I think as well, we need to talk about it more. And I know in your book, I read your book, Tia, we need to educate our young people in what is a healthy relationship and what is not a healthy relationship? What are the red flags? Because I was not taught. I actually grew up in a very good family. I never saw violence in my parents. I never saw abuse. And I didn't know what the red flags are. Now looking back in my relationship, I'm like, wow, that was a red flag. That was a red flag. That was a red flag. But no one ever pointed those out to me as a young lady. And so I think for our young people, I think our religious communities also are responsible for educating our young people in what is the difference between love and control. Love is not controlling. No, love is not oppression. Love is not abuse. And so that, I cannot speak enough about that is our religious leaders' responsibility to do that. What helps? The help pieces are when the community does the opposite in a way of what many things that you experienced. First of all, they are there just to listen and to believe this human being who's telling them that they are being abused in front of them. That's the first thing that helps. I think it helps in our religious community because there's a lot of stigma or culture around not sharing the intimate details of a marriage with anyone else. So that is something that stops women and men who are being abused from coming forth and talking to somebody. And so helping people to realize that, yes, your intimate relationships are private and you should keep them modest, but not if you are being abused and oppressed. That's when you can break that and go and talk to someone and come to the imam or talk to someone. I think also what helps is if there's a female in our community, I wouldn't feel comfortable going to a male and telling him. Mm-hmm. So I would want there to be a female who I could go and speak to, and maybe then she becomes the intermediate person between me and the imam, who is our religious leader. That would be helpful. And then, like you said, what else helps? helping financially, helping them find resources. A lot of women in our communities, English is not their first language. They're immigrants from other countries. We're very fearful of the law and going to the police because we think that's our kids are going to be taken away, or we don't understand what rights we have. So being the intermediate person or people to help a woman or a man who's experiencing domestic violence is so important. So those are like the practical things. And then there's the spiritual things, which is how can you help in a spiritual way in helping that person to find healing, whether it's counseling, whether it's having them be part of a community of other women or other people, connection, basically the opposite of isolation, blame, and all of those other things.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so I want to say this as well. And I want to, again, be very, very clear. I'm not saying don't pray. I'm not saying don't read the scriptures, don't read the Bible. I'm not saying don't believe in God, don't believe that you can have a better outcome. But I am saying faith without works is dead. Okay, you can't just pray and then you just wait for this situation to get better. No, there are some action steps that need to come behind it. And religious leaders need to be able to help put those steps together or just guide you in the right direction. Because again, it's okay to say, I don't know. You can actually have a plan and have information in front of you and still, the situation is just bigger than you. It's okay to say, I need to get someone involved who is experienced in this area and who can help. And that needs to be done. And you asked a question about domestic violence being addressed, at least in the areas that I see where I am, in churches specifically. It's addressed when I get there. It's addressed when I walk into a room and when I start the conversation and someone will ask me, can you come to my church? Can you speak on domestic violence? Can you preach on this? I want you to come this Sunday, or I want you to be here on Friday. And I will go and do it. And it is very, very common that I'm walking into a place where this is a subject that has never been brought up. This is a place where men and women are hurting deeply, not just from what they are experiencing today, but individuals are suffering from what has happened to them from years before. So a lot of times when I go in, my voice is the first one that they heard on this issue. And very, very sadly, when I leave, sometimes my voice is the last one that they heard, because it's like that's the exciting thing to do in the moment, and especially when October rolls around. When it's October's Domestic Violence Awareness Month, April is Sexual Assault Awareness Month. I mean, my calendar is filled, October, April, but it's like the rest of the year, everybody goes deaf and silence. And again, as we were saying earlier, when I was saying we want to have conversations that lead to action, even if I go into these places, me giving one sermon on a Sunday, me speaking at one event and just saying, hey, this needs to be brought out in the open. These are the facts. This is what needs to be done. This is information. These are some resources. It can't just stop there. It needs to go beyond that, because for many, many people, that would be the very first step for them in dealing with their issues or situations. And so you just have to keep the door open, and not just throw it out there. Just because you make an announcement and say, hey, this is important to us, that's it. Like, there needs to be
you need to back it up, and you need to keep pointing it out and keep talking about it. Absolutely.
Exactly. So Erin, I wanted to make a point and go to you, but I wanted to say, we do have the extreme of how religious leaders can harm. We have the extreme of how religious leaders can help, and as you said, Rachel, there's the spectrum in between. But I would be remiss if I did not say and acknowledge, what, sometimes it's the religious leaders themselves that are the ones who are abusing and not just taking advantage of their authority with not helping or not supporting. But there are some religious leaders who are actually ones that are committing acts of domestic violence, physical violence, emotional, mental. Some of their families are suffering from what they are doing to them. There are members in their congregations or services that are suffering from what they are doing to them. And I really want to say, and I want to emphasize, a religious leader is not God. I'm a religious leader. I'm not God. I'm a representative. And that also means I'm still a person. So I can do it the right way or I can do it the wrong way. And I really want to emphasize, I understand how important religion is, but we're still all people. None of us are God. So if you see something that is not right, if you see something that is bringing questions to your mind, that's making you feel uneasy, or something that you just know out and out is wrong, it does not make it okay because this person has a title in front of their name, reverend, pastor, imam, whatever it is. So I think it's easy to use religion. I think it's easy for religious leaders to use it as a banner to hide behind, to get away with the things that they're doing. So I want to be encouraging in that manner to, it's okay to speak up. It's okay to move. It's okay to get away from this person who is harming you, no matter who they are: husband, wife, preacher, pastor, teacher, boss, employer, whomever. I think those words are not shared enough. And I think especially for women, I think women do not hear the words enough that yes, you are empowered to do what you need to do for yourself. If you need to leave that church, leave. If you need to leave leave. You do have the power and authority to do that. You have the power and authority to do what's best for you. Seek out the information. And I know in some cases, just like you can't leave a home, I couldn't leave my home when I wanted to. I had to be prepared. I had to get money together. So sometimes you just put your plan together. You put your safety plan together. It's okay to start putting your plan together. It's okay to start building your support group. It's okay to start talking. It is absolutely okay to do that. And I want to encourage someone, if that's where you are right now, do it. If you have to start talking, start thinking, start researching information, do it. But I do want to acknowledge that sometimes the ones that we are looking to, they are the ones who are being abusive. With that, Erin, you have a question or comment?
Yes, I wanted to ask you, Rachel, if you could share if there's any, because of, the work that you're doing, especially with grief counseling and some of the work that you're doing in the community around domestic violence. I wanted to see, what have you seen that is the most transformational around people healing in a spiritual way, or really in any emotional way from their traumas. Do you see it having an impact in terms of prevention of abuse, or maybe amends being made so that families are no longer suffering from abusive situations? And I kind of just wanted to hear some experiences that you've had or what you've seen in the community.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think with the work that I do around grief, and I don't know, Tia, whether you experienced this, but when I came out of my abusive relationship, there was so much grief in so many ways. But one of the hardest things, you get away from your abuser, and then you're left with the grief and the trauma and this struggle of, how do I forgive myself for letting that happen to me? Mm-hmm. And the grief that you experience when you recognize, I let this person, or I didn't let this person, meaning I didn't want them to do it to me, but this person did this to me. And so I went through this whole experience of extreme grief after I realized how messed up my life had been for 7 years, how much I had endured for 7 years. And I think there's one thing to find forgiveness for the person that abused you, but and that's, I don't think for some people they ever get that, or they don't have to get there. How to find forgiveness for yourself is the more important thing. And so the work that I want to do with victims or survivors is to help them to go through that personal experience of spiritual healing, grief, allowing them to grieve all of that. And so grief, I believe strongly, is if you do not let it out, if you do not give it its airtime, it will eat at you. It will come out in other ways, whether it be anger, negative emotions, abuse in other ways. You become the person that then starts abusing. Grief can do so many things to a human being if it's not expressed. And so the work that I like to do inside my community is allowing those victims and survivors to heal from that grief, speak to that grief, find a way to forgive themselves, get to forgiveness for themselves. They don't need to get to the forgiveness of some do, but that's not what my main aim. And then, like you said, how can our religious communities and spiritual beliefs then get us to a place of, sometimes you still have to be in relationship with your abuser because they're the father of your children. So how is the community? And that's where I think, there's an amazing organization that talks about how forgiveness is the last step. First, there has to be justice, then repentance, and then restitution. But a lot of the time, survivors of domestic violence, the abuser they don't get justice, they don't get repentance, and they don't get restitution. So it's up to the community then to provide that. If the abuser doesn't do it, then how can the community be helpful in getting justice, repentance, and restitution? And it's going to look very different. But how can they support a family? If children have experienced it and witnessed all of this, how can you support them? And so the organizations and the people that I see doing it well have an awareness of the bigger picture of all of it, the community, the family, the individual, and work with all of them. And I think and unfortunately, like Tia said, there's not that many communities that are doing it well. There are some, and they are they're amazing when they do it well, because what they can provide then is spiritual healing, support, all of those things, so that then those children don't grow up and either become abusers or go away from the religion. They still have faith in their religion.
Yes.
Yeah, I love that. That's a wonderful. Yes, it's kind of that holistic approach, and almost like that diversity of angles that you must come in at. It can't just be in isolation for the person that is coming with the pain and with, that it's happening to, because the impact is then far and wide, especially with children involved. But even if there's not, there's still family units. There's still economic. You were mentioning earlier, Evangelist, about the economics of it, right? Like, this person's donate, that comes into play. It shouldn't, but that's the reality sometimes. And so if it is approached in this holistic way, and there's kind of a web of support from the spiritual community, and the plan that is in place is so essential, because otherwise it leads to more trauma for the individuals. And that goes for the abuser themselves, right? Like and you both have said tonight, who is talking to the abusers? Who's having conversations about healthy ways to communicate? Who's having conversations about how to process your own trauma, your own anger, so that you're not, putting it on the ones that you love, because they're quote unquote safe spaces. And I think that the religious and spiritual communities have so much potential to be so healing and really shift the conversations in a whole new way. And I think that that's really what you just spoke to, Rachel. So thank you.
So Rachel, I want to ask, do you have contact information that you can share if someone wants to reach out to you for your help and assistance?
Absolutely, yes. So as far as my grief and end of life, so I work with people at the end of life, but my grief coaching, you can find me at rachelbaldi.com. And my email, you could always find me at rachel@rachelbaldi.com. Do you want me to put it in the chat? Does everybody see the chat if I put it there?
Only we see that. But okay. So your website is rachelbaldi.com.
Yep.
Okay.
And they can find me there. And then my email is rachel@rachelbaldi.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And the answer to your question is yes, I did experience grief, but I didn't experience my grief until after I left.
Yes.
Until after I was out of the domestic violence situation. I had to deal with my trauma. I had to deal with triggers. I had to deal with my emotions. What I did not expect was to deal with grief. I left in February of 2014. I think I filed for divorce either March or April, either of that year or the next year. But when I filed for my divorce, it didn't take long for it to become final. I got the paperwork in the mail, opened it up. I had my letter and everything, with the official seal on it. I was very, very happy. I was ecstatic. I was. And then grief followed. It hit me. It was like my divorce was like experiencing a death. Yeah. Because when I got those papers, it was like Vin's like, okay, now this is final. Like for real, this is over. Like any hope, any thought I had that this man was going to be what I thought he could be, any hope at all, my family was going to be, what it should have been. It was like getting that paperwork. It's like, no, this is it. And I believe part of the grief dealing with the divorce was that the church was against that too. Mm-hmm. And I do not believe that anyone should go for a divorce and it's just frivolous. Like you just wake up one day, oh, I want somebody who's a little bit taller. I want somebody who makes some more money. And that's foolishness. But I literally explained, this man is going to kill me. I need to leave because I need to save my life. And the church was against that no matter what. So again, my question was, when do I become a real person in front of you? When does my life become valuable? Mm-hmm. And so the grief that I experienced, it was intense. I think the intensity was even greater because I didn't expect it. I didn't expect it at all. And when you're dealing with this, when you're going through domestic violence, you don't know what to expect. As a victim or a survivor, when you're moving through, and we say all the time, healing is not linear. It's not a straight line. You're up, down, all around, backwards, forwards. You don't know what to expect. But when you're in it, the emotions and the trauma that you're dealing with, the mental aspect, can be just as harmful, can be just as hurtful, can be just as devastating as the actual violence when you're in it. So I would really, Love Bae, want to emphasize that you do need to take care of yourself. You do need to tend to that hurt. You do need to tend to that grief. As Rachel said, do not ignore it. Even if you've gone to your religious leaders and they have not given you the help that you need, that does not mean that you shut down and that you stop trying to take care of yourself. That means you just have to go to a different place. Even if it's a different religion, there have been others who have gotten help from different faith communities. And so it's like, I'm here for you. If I can do whatever you need for me to do to help you, I'm going to do that. If we're dealing with domestic violence, we're dealing with domestic violence. We're not talking about faith and prayers right now. Look, I need to help you do whatever it is that needs to get done. So if you don't get what you need from the place that you're seeking help, from family, from friends, from your religious organization, then you go to another place. If one domestic violence agency isn't meeting the need that you have, seek out another. You keep going and do what you need to do. But again, as Rachel said, do not ignore what comes up in your heart. Do not ignore what comes up in your mind, because pushing it away and trying to bury it, it's only going to give rise for that anger or that hurt to explode, I would say, in a massive manner. And I would say it would come out in a way that you absolutely don't expect.
And a lot of the time in illness, grief is when you lose. People think grief is just about when someone dies. It's important to you, a dream or something you truly believed in. And so, like you said, you have that experience that your marriage is over, the dream of your marriage is over, the family as you knew it was over, the way you were living, your experiences, all of that is over. And so for some, I strongly believe that illness, it can come out in illness and bad health and all other things. And that was something that I experienced when I was trying to suppress my grief. So, and going back to, God doesn't want us to suffer. God doesn't want us to suffer. And so if anyone is suffering, God doesn't want us to be oppressed. I know in our religion and in the Quran, it is written that no harm should be done. No human should do harm or oppress one another. And God doesn't want that. And so you have the human right to ask for help, to look for help. And like Tia's saying, if the first person isn't there to help, it doesn't provide you with help, keep finding, keep searching, keep asking, because that is not what God wants for you.
So I want to acknowledge all of those religious organizations, leaders who are doing the work, who are acknowledging that domestic violence is real. It is in their congregations or their places of worship. And even those who are doing the work and are going outside of the organization and into the communities that make up those organizations, to be able to go into the neighborhoods. So there are some that are doing the work. Unfortunately, it's just not a lot. And I have seen that those who are doing the work need help. They need financial help. They need people who are experienced and know and understand what they're doing. So it's kind of like as Erin and I and other board members, we're raising money. It is always the little old lady who wants to give $20, who wants to help because somewhere in her life she dealt with or saw domestic violence. And it's like, that is just so amazing, but there are some individuals who have the financial means to help on a greater scale. There are some individuals who have the expertise to help on a greater scale. And so I say to those, if you are called in a leadership position in whatever religion you serve in, it's more than just getting up on a Sunday morning, a Saturday, a Friday, or whatever it is, standing in front of people so they can just listen to you for a few minutes and then you sit down. No, do something. People's lives are supposed to be changed for the better. So make the organizations better, make the neighborhoods better, make the communities better. At the very, very least, acknowledge that this is a real issue. It's happening. It's happening because we are here. we are here. And it's not likely that a lot of people will speak out and come forward, but that does not mean that the issue does not need to be and should not be addressed. We are able to share our voices. And I know full well somebody else wants to and they can't. And so religious leaders have a huge responsibility. And I really hope that the upcoming year shows us that religious leaders are going to do more than the word, not just say it, but actually do it. Because we can't keep waiting for October and April. And I don't know. I don't know if there is an aspect of domestic violence that bothers me more than when religious leaders don't do what they're supposed to do.
Well, I think Erin said, Erin said there's so much potential in our religious communities, and that is so true. There is so much potential because the impact that our religious leaders could have in our religious communities is huge if they step up. if they do what we're talking about. And it doesn't mean that they, like you said, they have to know everything and know all the answers, but at least they get someone else who does, or they have the resources available. So there is so much potential, and I dream of a world where they do step up, and the ones that I see are doing, it keeps amplifying. There's more and more ones that are doing it well, or doing it with integrity.
Yes. So we are just under the hour. So I want to ask you, Rachel, and you, Erin, for your final thoughts on this evening. Again, I want to emphasize that I acknowledge that there are some religious organizations who are doing the work, and they are there. But I also feel like the truth still has to be told and shared, that is still an issue with religious leaders handling domestic violence the wrong way. I think if you don't talk about it, if you cover it up, it's just going to continue to go on. And somebody's going to be hurt, because there have been individuals who have died following the advice from religious leaders who did not know what they were doing. For religious leaders to send someone back to a house and they've expressed, this man or this woman is going to kill me, and you tell them to go back because this is what God wants you to do, or because because you have children. No, people have lost their lives. So I want to emphasize the truth of the matter. It's real. The harmful side is there. We can't ignore it. And religious leaders need to do what we're supposed to do to not completely rectify the situation, because domestic violence is something that is there, but to acknowledge the situation and do our part. So with that, Erin, I'll ask you first if you leave us with your final comments for tonight, and then Rachel will have your final words of the evening. Erin?
Sure. Just such an honor to be with you both during this really powerful conversation. And thank you, especially Rachel, for all of the healing work that is so apparent and just coming through you in your voice and in what you're sharing, and all your beautiful website and what you do to support people in their grief. And that really is an act of prevention, because it empowers the individual to not then put themselves in a violent situation, because they are, regaining their center by that healing process, and perhaps, then helping somebody with their grief also prevents an abuser, because then if we're grief stricken, we're often taking our anger out on the ones that we love the most. And so I just really applaud you, and am so honored to be with you tonight. And thank you to all the Love Bay listeners. It's just always a pleasure. Thank you, Evangelist Tia. You always inspire me.
Thank you so much, Erin. Rachel, if you would leave Love Bay with your final words on tonight, what would you say to our listeners and viewers?
Yeah, I think I'll try and bottom line, which is a coaching skill. Two things. One, let's create communities and religious leaders that do far more help than harm. So right now, I feel like the balance is more harm than help. I want it to be the other way around, much more help than harm. So I dream of a world where there are religious communities that do lots more help than harm. And then I want to just speak to anyone who's experienced domestic violence right now. And I am an example of someone who has been able to transform their life. And so I want to give anyone hope that they have the ability to transform their lives as well. They have the ability to heal from their experience. If you think, there was times where I thought, I'm never, ever going to be whole again, and I can now speak from a place of wholeness and healing. Doesn't mean that I haven't got trauma, and doesn't mean that days aren't hard, but I just want people to know. And so the first step is to believe that you can go and get help, and that you can heal and transform and be the person that you're meant to be, and the person that God wants you to be. So that's my message.
Awesome.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much. Thank you. Thank you for being with us, Rachel. Erin, thank you as always for being here. Love Bay, if you want to catch up on previous episodes of our program, you can visit our YouTube channel, Suffering in Silence DV. We thank you so much for joining Suffering in Silence with Evangelist Tia here on Love Bay Afrobeat Music Talk Radio. We're here with you every Friday evening at 7 p.m. Eastern. And Love Bay, we want you to remember that we are rising out of the ashes together. Good evening.